everyone. Welcome to Geek Out. It's March, the end of March, almost Easter. Thank you all for making it to the session today on automation. So I will quickly zoom through the intro and an introduction to our geeks. We have a lot of content today around Ansible and workflow automation, automation orchestration. So if you've got any questions, don't wait till the end. Throw them into the chat box as soon as you think of them. And if we don't get to answer them today, we will definitely reach out to you after the event to make sure you get the answers. Also, there are JB Hi-Fi vouchers again for the best questions. So definitely, if you've got anything you're curious about, drop it into the chat box. We are seeing them all. All of these slides will be made available as well at the end of the, or at some point, probably after Easter, because nobody wants to work this weekend. Let's get straight into it. So we're talking about automation and orchestration. Let me change the screen. Okay, there we go. And these are our geeks here today, Christopher and Matt. Can you guys tell me a bit about yourself, maybe starting with Matt, who's in the room with me?
Sure. I work in the managed services team within NetApp, helping customers to automate and orchestrate their environments. I've been working for NetApp for about 7 years now and loving it.
And Christopher?
Yes, I'm a solutions engineer and I cover New Zealand, and I largely focus on our cloud infrastructure solutions, and automation, of course, is one of the things that I enjoy most.
Yeah, don't be fooled by the accent. He's definitely a Kiwi.
I am an adopted Kiwi. Sorry.
Yeah, Christopher will be at AWS Summit with me next month, by the way. So if you want to see proof that he is actually a Kiwi, come and say hi. So moving to the doesn't want to change. Okay, automation versus orchestration. So, Christopher, can you just give me a 25 words or less? What's the difference? Why would you do one and not the other? Why would you do both?
Yeah, and I suspect there's probably a few different views on this. The way that I see the two of them fitting together is that, automation is a way to make things easier and simpler, to aggregate in a reliable way a number of monotonous tasks or things that we'd rather not do. And to me, automation then feeds up into the bigger picture, which is orchestration. How do I take all these different automated workflows now and actually have them coordinate across an enterprise or across just an application stack?
Is there anything that you wouldn't orchestrate, for example? So you might automate something, but it's not part of an orchestration workflow?
I was going to say lunch, but I wouldn't automate or orchestrate either one of those. I suppose there are a number of things that still do require a human touch, right? Whether it's authorizations or permission or a manual review before they happen. So there are certainly things that still keep us in a job, and we don't want to have automatically kicking off. A classic one would perhaps be an automated failover. As wonderful as it is to talk about, normally you want to have a manual checkpoint in there before it happens.
Yeah, and do you see that, your customers, you talk to a lot of your customers about this space, is, are they talking about automation as something that is just, it's part of the way that they're building their environment, or is it something that they do after they've built it and then they go, how do we automate this?
Yeah, due to a lot of times the time constraints, it is something that gets added on later, but more and more of the conversation is moving towards automation first, platforms that need to be able to do it out of the gate, as opposed to using, say, some of our more traditional or existing products like SnapCenter and Snap Manager, which are awesome in terms of being able to integrate certain flows. It's more about being API ready and being able to be driven by any kind of a configuration management tool or an orchestration tool.
Yeah. So I know you've got some great content to share and a demo to show our Geek Out attendees on Ansible. So I'm going to hand over the this little presenter thingy to you.
Sounds good.
and you can share your screen. I guess while you do that, Matt, how do you see the difference between orchestration and automation and orchestration in your job?
Look, I mean, I think there's a definite trend towards orchestration, and from my perspective, that makes a lot more sense to integrate. Automation tends to be very script-focused, whereas orchestration tends to be more holistically centralized and auditable, and so I see more customers moving towards porting their existing automation into orchestration tools, which then linked to other orchestrators in an enterprise environment.
Yeah, so kind of where automation might be a script for a single or a couple of tasks, orchestration might be integration with other systems,
exactly.
Like a service desk, tickets, or monitoring and so on.
You tend to get a business process end-to-end out of multiple orchestrators.
Oh, sorry, I've probably done the wrong thing there. I need to present it back. Sorry about
and one of the things that we, that's all right. Well, one of the things that we do want to show you at the end of this then is, I will take you through some of the Ansible pieces and then tie that up into what Matt's going to do with some orchestration. And as we go through this, I want you to think of it as an example of a tool that can be used for a larger solution.
My screen is better. Okay, I'm going to get through these slides. So Ansible and NetApp, what's the relationship there?
So Ansible is so Ansible is a Red Hat product now, and Red Hat is a global alliance partner of ours. We have a lot of joint and shared solutions, and this is one of those examples of where there has been a lot of collaboration and allows us to tackle what I think is a lot of the new challenges and the new segments in the market, and which is not necessarily traditional applications. It is the applications that are driven or that drive the infrastructure themselves directly. So Ansible is an overview here. It's a configuration management tool. It is something that can be used for your application deployment, automate any variety of tasks. And the cool thing is that it's not really just NetApp specific or even data management or, if you will, storage specific. It's something that can tie into all kinds of different platforms. And the truly satisfying projects that I've been involved in is where tools like this don't just talk to the data management plane. They're talking to the hyperscaler, AWS or Azure. They're talking to networking as well as the compute stacks, as well as the virtualization stack on site, whether that be Hyper-V or VMware, because the end goal is to streamline a process, and I can't do that from just one segment. So a tool like Ansible is a great way to drive repeatability and speed into a lot of these actions. So as you would expect, it's integrated into an awful lot of the NetApp solutions as well, not just the standard ONTAP that we've loved and have known for many years, but also SolidFire, also Storage Grid, and a number of up-and-coming offerings that we're working on. So we can hop to the next slide there.
These technical differences.
I don't know if I have
crazy slow. Yeah. So
all right.
I wanted to ask, like, what are the other things? If I'm not using Ansible, which might not be, what else would I be?
Yeah.
What else would I be investigating?
Yeah. So there's I guess I'll step back to the orchestration versus automation. There is an awful lot of overlap as well in terms of how that gets defined and the capabilities of the different tool sets. So we have other components or other offerings out there, say Jenkins or Puppet, Chef, that allow you to manage some of your configuration and allow you to also automate some actions. And
how do you choose? How do your customers choose?
Yeah.
Which one?
I think it's probably, you have to prioritize first what's most important to you. For example, if you're a service provider, it is more important to you to have an environment in a known state so that it can be run in a specific configuration because it's tied to an SLA, whether that's performance or capacity, and it's also then tied, of course, to profitability SLA. You need to make sure that everything is guided as closely as possible, and that's in those spaces. For example, I think Ansible excels. In other scenarios, perhaps if you're looking at something like managing a continuous improvement or a development pipeline, something like Jenkins and Chef would be better in terms of automating a more complex process flow with different outcomes at the end. You know, and all of these are kind of involved in numerous ways, often by a bunch of sitting around writing scripts and creating libraries of cool things that have added tremendous value, but at the end of the day, they often don't end up being supportable beyond ourselves or beyond our immediate team or over time. And that is really one of the goals, again, specifically for Ansible, to eliminate the flakiness that we've always been trying to eliminate, introduce additional repeatability into the environment.
Yeah, I've got to ask. I mean, it's and I don't know if other guys on the call, guys and girls on the call, would be interested. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is the proliferation of open source, and like you mentioned then, like writing your own scripts, writing your own libraries. How does Ansible and how does NetApp and Ansible work together to make sure that that's a supported environment? You're not just kind of locking yourself into the intelligence of a really smart programmer who might leave your company.
Yeah, so that is certainly a thing that we've probably been guilty of in the past as well, which is, hey, there's a whole bunch of cool tools here, go for it. And it's like handing someone a Lego box, which is great, but without any of the manuals. So the manuals is really the piece where we've come to the scene here. And with Ansible, those things are called modules. And we have a number of supported modules that we will continue to maintain and version that give you that 80% of the functionality that you probably need. They're available directly via the distribution. They're also available through resources that we'll share with you later on, like our automation store and our online pub, that make sure these solutions transcend, you know, a single employment. If we move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more detail about how this all kind of ties together specifically. So part of it's got to be easy, right? I always say it's SSH or SSL and magic. That's just how it works. You don't have to install any agents. It pushes and it pulls. It uses the existing APIs of the different vendor kits. So it doesn't matter if it's a Cisco switch or a Juniper switch or an ONTAP array, SolidFire, an HP array, Dell array. It will be able to talk to it and allow you to do some pretty clever things. Now, the modules, we'll talk about how those fit in here very shortly, are written in Python. They can be written in anything. If you're a PowerShell person, don't shy away from this. And the configurations are written in YAML, which YAML is very clear to point out that it's not yet another markup language. YAML ain't a markup language, as they say. It is a data serialization language. It is intended to run through things in a serial process sequentially. And the point of one of the core points of Ansible is to create that idempotent environment, which is it is an environment that is effectively unchanging, achieved by being able to tell something. So, for example, if many of us, some of us are probably parents in here, you tell your child to go play outside, and he or she goes outside. If they're already outside, you don't make them come back inside and go back outside again. They're already outside, that's great, cool. You want to maintain that state. You don't want to force any kind of a change. You take that into an example of a piece of infrastructure like the size of the volume. You want to basically say, look, if you're not this size, be this size, 100 gigs. And if you already are, great, awesome. I'm not going to try to operate on that volume to force a change. The way a lot of our scripts might have done, where they just perform an action. They can't actually take in the inputs, evaluate, and then say no change required. And so, you know, the goal is that with this is that you have an immutable infrastructure that doesn't change. So on the next slide, I'll show how these pieces tie together and how it drives into your environment. So you have an Ansible server, which is just a Linux box, and I'll show you mine here. It's just a little AMI running in AWS. You have inventory of hosts, and you have playbooks. These playbooks are a collection of plays, which call them modules. They communicate over the secure transport to your server or your data management device or whatever it is, your switch, and perform the functions to bring that environment in line to make those changes that are required. So if we go to the next slide, what I'm going to try to do now is walk through this and share with you just a very quick little set of scripts and show you some of these playbooks. So Phoebe, if you can pass me presenter, I'm going to try to share a couple of different things here.
Yeah. Yeah, so a question comes through while you get that set up. How does Ansible complement WFA, or is it intended to replace it?
Yeah, it's definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not intended to replace it. It is a, I don't want to say middleware, but you can use it as one of your many workflows. So one of the workflows in your environment might be, hey, let's double check that all of the volumes have a snapshot schedule that are set per the policy. Super. And then at that point, perhaps the next process is, let's create a bunch of new volumes for client X who's just been onboarded, or deploy a new application, or make a change to repair something that's wrong. Maybe at that point it means we call another module that will resize those volumes after we know that the snapshot schedules are in place. And those two individual plays could, or playbooks could be driven from WFA. One of the things that I often say is you know, just like the programming language you like to use the orchestrator of your choice, and WFA is a good option for that. So what you're seeing here is, just very quickly, is my little Linux box, a little microserver, and you are also seeing the NetApp Cloud Manager, which manages ONTAP Cloud inside AWS and in Azure and soon a few other places, and my little ONTAP box called Cloud Files. When I look at the OnCommand Cloud Manager, I'm actually going to back out of here and show my working environment. So you can see I've got Cloud Files 10, which is running in Sydney in AWS. I could have you know, dozens of these around different locations in the world. And if I go into Cloud Files, where we just were, I'll look at the resources. And here, what you have is one volume, 5 gigs in size, no big deal. So let's go ahead and show you how we would go about making a change. So I'm going to share my little terminal session here. So I'm in my playbooks directory, where all of your playbooks will be kept. And this is a kind of a basic, certainly a basic Ansible installation. And I've created a couple of different config files here, a couple of different playbooks. You can see one will start, another one will stop my instance, and then I've got one for volumes. So let me go ahead and go into Cloud Files, volume. Inside this playbook, we have, there's a structure, and look, there's a lot of great resources and tutorials and online videos that walk you through this in more detail. But what we effectively do is we define our variables. What are we connecting to? Highly secure password. Oh, you can see. Oh, can't hear me. All right. Can you hear me, Phoebe?
I can hear you. Can anybody else hear what's going on? Oh, no audio. Is he muted?
If anyone else reports, I can certainly disconnect. Yeah. All right, okay, I see a bunch of, I can hear you. All right, great.
It's just, it was just a test.
No worries. Well, in case it hasn't come back, basically this is a playbook, and a playbook is a number of different, a collection of tasks in here. So you can see this task is defined. The name of this task is Volume Manager. It calls a module called NetApp CDOC Volume, and assigns a name or checks for a name, uses performs a function inside that aggregate, establishes a size of gigs, talks to a certain vServer. Now, kind of a little bit of a parallel way to describe this. If this volume's not there, it will create it at this size inside that vServer, inside that aggregate. If it is there, if you recall, that is a 5 gig volume, and you change this configuration. Again, this is quite basic. You might be driving this from an external script or an application that modifies this variable. But if I change this to 45 gigs, and this playbook now executes, which is executed via Ansible playbook, you give it the playbook file. It will go ahead and change that file, change that volume, I'm sorry. So what you can see here is it's telling you, look, this is the play. I want to go ahead and execute this task in here, the volume manager, cloud files 10. Hey, we've changed something inside here, and there's a status of 1 changed. Here's the cool part of that about Ansible. This is 1 volume, or it could be 10,000 volumes. You run it a second time, it will go out and it'll say, look, that volume's already that size. It's changed nothing. You can also run these in an audit mode so you can see how your environment might be changed before you actually do it. So again, volumes is one thing. Imagine managing 1,000 VLANs like this and making sure they're all configured correctly across all your different switches. It is a very powerful tool at scale. So if I flip back over here and refresh this volume, you'll see the volume is now 45 gigs. But very simple. And the last little piece that I'll show you just to describe the extent of it and some of the cool things you can do is the Amazon integration. So you can see I had my cloud file start and stop. This will call an EC2 module. Oops, start up. Ansible playbook. Cloud files. It will call an EC2 instance and will connect to my VPC and turn that resource off. Something that, of course, is something you want to make sure to do, and I schedule on a nightly basis so that my personal bills don't get too high. But it is a very cool thing you can tie into a configuration management solution like this. Say you're running a bunch of ONTAP cloud instances and their replication targets, and they're only supposed to be running between certain times. Yes, you can schedule turning them on and turning it off, but you can also go ahead and have them check and be audited on a regular basis to make sure that they're not running, that they haven't been manually started up again. So this usually takes about a minute or so, and I know we're running a bit tight on time, so I'm going to let it finish. Oh, there we go. So you can see it changed. If I run it again, it's just going to go ahead and check and say, cool. It's not connecting and issuing a power off command on an application that is already stopped. So let me go ahead and pass presenter back over to CB here, and I will wrap this up with one slide and then pass it over to Nat to show you how we make this even more interesting at the big scale. All right, so there we go. So some of the cool things that this opens up to you is not just straight configuration management, but some of the things that come along with it, and that is security. Imagine if you could manage your entire environment and disallow administrator access because everything is driven via a programmatic console. One of the things that Red Hat has done to make this easier is there's a graphical interface, to put it simply, a server they call Tower. It's also freely available as the AWX project. And if you do play a little bit with Ansible and you decide, wow, this is really useful, I'm going to go big scale on this, seriously consider going this way first because it ties in all kinds of things like remote access control. You can address this server via APIs from external orchestrators like WFA, tie-in notifications, and a lot of additional enterprise wins. Now, Ansible in space or AWX is something that you can deploy freely. If you want to pay for support, then that's something that is also possible. So taking that and wrapping it into a nice job status interface, you have the ability then to create scripts and build configurations which are supportable beyond the immediate team, and then can be handed over to an operational or a help desk to onboard a new application, onboard a new user, report back to management in terms of what the status of the environment is. And that's, again, one of the really nice things about Ansible is taking and doing all of this in a very regular, repeated manner. And that's really important when someone like Matt tries to take this and drive it from a larger orchestrator. So I will hand it back over to Phoebe and Matt to take you to the next phase.
Thank you, Christopher. Guys, just a reminder, if you've got any questions, throw them into chat, whether that's about Ansible or about ONTAP Cloud and Cloud Manager that Christopher used in his demo, or even why he runs a terminal that looks so old school. Any of those questions are welcome. So Matt's going to show us, and we're going to dive straight into it, an automation process using OnCommand Workflow Automator, which is WFA, and OnCommand Unified Manager, which is OCUM, to develop a self-healing environment. So this is actually an environment that doesn't require running a playbook manually, not that you would, but it could involve other automated processes. So maybe if you could just quickly walk us through, I just noticed our list has 2 number 3 items, which is really interesting. But yeah, what does this do, and what tools are you using to do it?
So essentially, the 2 main tools from NetApp's portfolio is WFA and OCUM, both of which are freely available, so there's no licensing cost to those. And all of our customers that would be using, that have ONTAP in their environment will be using OCUM to monitor the storage systems. And so really what I'll be discussing is how we can integrate that monitoring environment into WFA so that instead of reacting to an operational event, we can be proactive in terms of, rather than being woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning while you're on call because, you know, your volume quota's full, or, you know, my volume's full, my volume's offline, my LUN's offline. OCUM will already be monitoring your clustered ONTAP environment. It will already be getting those events and those alerts, and so we can then use WFA to integrate OCUM to connect to WFA and take a proactive action on that.
Cool. So there's a lot of words and a lot of acronyms there. So this is what you're going to demonstrate for us?
Absolutely. So essentially, just to step you through, on the left-hand side, you've got OnCommand Unified Manager, which is going to be monitoring and discovering your storage environment. So that'll be polling your systems on a schedule, and then on the right-hand side, you've got WFA. And what I'll be demonstrating is, in OnCommand Unified Manager, there's a script plugin which you can use to have a template script which will call WFA via the REST API, and it'll pass some very minimal information to WFA, and WFA will then use OnCommand APIs to retrieve all of that event information that has occurred. Say, for example, my iSCSI service is stopped on a vServer, and then it will take a corrective action based on that via calling a child workflow.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it's kind of like, you know, it gets all the information. To me, it's kind of like a drive-through almost, right? So, but it's one run by robots, where you go in, you tell it, there might be an event that happens, somebody's rocked up at the drive-through, they've ordered a certain number of ingredients from their burger and they want a shake. That goes into the system that is the fast food computer, so the automation system, that then does an action, so whether it's building something or sending it out, yeah. So it all happens automatically. So, oh, cool. So let's jump straight into the demo, I reckon. I'll hand you over presenter. There we go.
Thinking about it. Sharing my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Yep. So here is one of the references that I'll be providing a demonstration for. So that's TR4585. I've made some slight improvements to this just in terms of some security and centralizing some of the business logic based on your operational events. Instead of writing scripts that would be run on your OCUM server, you are then centralizing that into an orchestration tool, which is WFA. So I'm just going to jump into my lab. We'll get OCUM up here.
So if anybody was wondering, don't worry about scribbling that down. We can send you out the TR link directly.
So you can see I'm monitoring a few clusters here in my environment. What you would normally do is you would have some alerts that you would set up. So just quickly on here, and I'll just be demonstrating just how you would set up an environment so that, for example, if my iSCSI service goes down on this vServer, it's going to run this script here, which will call WFA, and WFA will then decide what to do if that event occurs. So normally, OCUM will be monitoring your cluster and looking at all the events that are occurring in your storage environment. So I've got a few here, for example, inode's nearly full. That's a typical type of thing that you might be woken up to react to if you're on call. So rather than have to do that manually, wouldn't it be nice if OCUM could simply discover that and pass it on to WFA, and you let WFA sort it out, right? So back to the events. I'm going to demonstrate now how you would trigger this alarm. So I'm going to stop an iSCSI service on one of my vServers here. Right, so we can see the administrative status of the iSCSI service is now down, and just in the interest of time, OCUM hasn't discovered that this service is down here, so I'm just going to refresh this.
How frequently does OCUM poll?
So it polls by default every 15 minutes, so it could be in the next 2 minutes. It discovered that 12 minutes ago, right? So in 3 minutes it would discover that that has occurred, but I'm just going to force that event to update. Refresh. And that's completed. And so we should see over here, we've now got SCM iSCSI service down. Right, so there's an event being created in OCUM, which is going to tell WFA that we need to take a corrective action. So I'm just going to flick over to the OCUM server, and in the script plugin directory, you'll see here that it is called this script, which I've uploaded there, which is then we've got a log file here, and what it's basically done is I've externalized the configuration so that you don't need to put your credentials in clear text. It's encrypted into the registry in OCUM, and if you wanted to change the host name of your OCUM server later, you just update a few registry keys, right?
So this comes back to as well, like the reusability, that you could put this into another environment, and obviously the other environment won't have the same credentials and cluster details, so you can share your scripts, and then you just say, go create these entries so that they're custom to you. Yeah.
Absolutely, and so you can see here that this script has called a workflow by a particular ID, so I'm now going to switch over to WFA and see what WFA has done with that. reopen this. I think.
Our live demo god.
Stay on page. There we go. So, as you can see, that was the number 34854, and what the workflow has done. So OCUM has called this workflow, and I'm just going to show you the logs from this. It's just running a little bit slow in my lab here. That is the event ID that occurred, and if we have a look at the logs, we can see that WFA knows that the SVM iSCSI service is down. It gives you all the event details there that you would ever want to know, and what it's done, it is invoked a child workflow called set vserver service and giving you the event ID by the WFA job ID, so 34855, and we can come back up here and see that that workflow has been called and been successfully run. And we'll just have a quick look at the logs, see what's happened.
And so once you've done this for an event such as iSCSI down, you could then basically replicate it for any other event that you wanted to act on?
Absolutely. So, you know, it's not just for iSCSI down, it could be my SIFs is down, my NFS service is down.
Yep.
My volume's full, my quota's full, my LUN's offline, my volume's offline, whatever the operational event is that is a typical reoccurring instance in a customer's environment, you can tweak this system so that you don't have to do these type of things manually. Mm-hmm. And so you can see that what it's basically done is it's looked at the iSCSI service, it's seen that it's down, and then it's done a start on the service. All right, so if we go back over to our command line here, and we have a look at the iSCSI service, previously it was down, and now we can see it's back up again, right? And so if I switch back over to Unified Manager now,
and just refresh that?
And just refresh, we'll see any second now. That this event here is now disappeared. So we've basically automated the process of resolving that event by getting OCUM to talk to WFA and WFA to talk to ONTAP to resolve things.
Awesome. We have had a couple of questions, so I would like to dive into those and then wrap up our session. So if you've got any other questions, throw them in here. The first question was, with regards to self-healing, would I need to install the plugin into OCUM or just link WFA to OCUM? So in terms of plugins, I guess that's my question, is what are the pieces that you would need to install? So OCUM and WFA can talk natively. There's a connection between them?
There's a script plugin, so you would need to upload a script, and you would need to configure an alert in OCUM and attach that script to it to call WFA.
Okay. Is that covered in the
That's covered in that TR.
Excellent. So we can share that with I think with everybody after this event. Is there any way to detect that my LUN is full and then to expand the LUN and volume, or would I need to use an external monitoring tool to send the events that the LUN is full and then to...
No, you could absolutely detect that. So OCUM will know, it will give you an event and say your LUN's full, in which case it's probably going to go offline, and then you could create a workflow which would remediate that.
Yeah, OCUM does threshold monitoring as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So you could say, oh, when it's 95% full. Or...
And that's the idea. You might use something like this as a catch-all. For example, you know, you could be using volume auto size at a particular threshold, and then if it goes past that because someone's copying a lot of data, you might have that the last backup, last man standing is this script plugin which will automatically resize your volume.
Cool. And we did have an interesting question here. We talked Christopher talked a little bit about item potency, which is basically that if it tried to do it once, and it found that it was already the case, it wouldn't try it again, like it wouldn't make it stop and then start again. How would that work here? This is not an idempotent system, is it? So it will try and recreate it would try and start the service even if somebody had manually gone in and tried to start it.
That's correct. So, I mean, you would build the logic of how you would react, for example, to the iSCSI service being down and take whatever corrective actions you would want within your workflow that OCUM is calling.
Yeah. So it could work really well with an Ansible, for example, to check to do
You could have your WFA workflow call an Ansible playbook, for example.
Yeah. And this is a good one as well while I get presented back. Is there a way to do this in an event-driven manner rather than wait for polling?
I believe you can subscribe OCUM to EMS events, so OCUM will talk, but the cluster will subscribe to that event, so it'll basically forward it to OCUM.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good one. But yes, OCUM by its nature is a polling system.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I have, I think, 3 minutes to wrap up. There are a number of other questions that I haven't answered yet. If I haven't, you will get an email and a reach out from the team here. If you have any other questions as well, feel free to forward them on. I need to put an email onto our Geek Out presentation. Here's a couple of links and resources. Don't write them down, you'll get the deck. The technical report that Matt is referring to is about halfway down on that, called the Self-Healing Data Fabric, which is TR4585. Also check out the automation store where a couple of similar scripts like to automate some of those activities, starting up iSCSI and so on, have already been written for you in different languages. And a couple of reminders in the last 10 or so seconds. AWS Summit for ANZ is on the 10th to the 12th of April at the International Convention Centre, the ICC in Sydney, the new one. For Geek Out attendees who reach out to this email address, anzinfo@netapp.com, let us know you're attending, come and say hello, come and check out some of the cloud demos. I'll be there, and so will Christopher and a bunch of our other the rest of our team, and we'll be giving out some special swag if you mention that you heard about it through Geek Out. The next Geek Out will be in April. It's going to be just after Summit. We have a couple of really cool things to talk about then, so tune in. I don't have a date yet, but you'll get an email. There's also the Infrastructure Operations Management and Data Center Summit at the end of April in Sydney. If you are attending that, again, reach out, feel free to say hello and ask any questions about today's session on Ansible and WFA orchestration and automation. If you have any feedback, please forward them through to me. And I didn't even mention, but my name is Phoebe Go. I'm a cloud architect here in Sydney, and thank you all for attending. Apologies for a couple of the technical difficulties. I promise next time we will have even more cool demos to show you. And 1 minute to spare.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.